Hello, hello. Welcome to the sketch session. Nice to see you all. Let me just wait a couple of seconds to see if I'm popping up on the screen over there to make sure that I'm not just talking into the blank space. So far I'm not seeing myself, so I'm crossing my fingers that now I see myself. So I guess the online gods are with me. Oh, so excited we get to draw together today. I do have to say I'm a little bit dreading what we're doing today, and I'll elaborate in just a second. But if you are here for the very first time, if you're catching the replay, my name is Carolyn Peters. I'm the owner of Cura Studios, an art studio in Orange, but currently I'm mainly doing online classes and online sketch sessions like this. And I do these sketch sessions for two main reasons. First reason is because it's the next best thing to hanging out in person and having a place to go to draw together, where you know, okay, it's that time, that's when I go pull up my sketchbook and I draw. It's just like, you know, that place to report to, like the gym class I usually go to work out. And the second reason is it's a fun way to practice, but more importantly, it's a focused way of practicing, because every week I provide a changing subject matter. We rotate, we cycle through figure, portrait, animals and nature, or like inanimate objects. And then every single week, there's a different lesson. There's a different thing that I'm pinpointing that I'm trying to practice. And so combine those two, and I think you have a good time. At least in my book, it's a great time. I've been enjoying myself doing this with all of you. So as I said, today I'm dreading it. It's the subject matter is plants. That's not the part I'm dreading. I'm dreading the focus that we're having. The focus is complexity. So in particular, what better to draw than foliage, leaves and shrubs and grass and stuff like that. Like how to make sense of all that visual information, not lose your mind, and actually kind of enjoy it, maybe, possibly. So I have a couple of different images. I'm planning on working from 3 different images together, and we'll just see how it goes. And as I said, I'm kind of dreading it because this is not something I do very often. Like if you give me the figure, I'm game any day. I'm like, yay, let's draw the figure, let's draw heads, I'm down. But with complexity, something I try to, you know, shy away from. And so I'm so glad I'm having this sketch group with you so we can kind of knuckle through this together, if that's even an expression. So what I'll do is I'll switch the camera. You will be able to see the screen, like my reference I'm drawing, as well as my drawing board. And you can either put me on mute and just kind of draw from the reference, or you can just watch, whatever you prefer. So, and if you have questions at any time, just pop them into the chat, and we're good to go. So let me find where I'm at here. Okay, let's transition this. Alrighty, so we're starting up with a doozy. It's like when you're drawing something like that, where the heck do you even start? So I have 5 guidelines for you today. 5 things to keep in mind when you're trying to tackle this kind of subject matter. And the first thing is, when you have a reference like this, you need to begin by choosing a focus. You cannot, I mean, you could just jump in willy-nilly and see where it leads. Personally, that strategy has never really worked out for me well. So, you know, I've learned. And so now I spend a good time just looking. And there is no right answer for what you choose. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me see if I can, I don't know if you can see my cursor. I think you can. So I'm kind of just scanning this reference right now, and I'm asking myself, what would I be interested in figuring out? Since this is an exercise setting, I'm kind of looking for areas, maybe this area here. They're just kind of calling my name. And like the 2 areas that I'm calling my name are like this. I kind of like this cluster. And I kind of like what's happening in here. but I also like what's happening from here to there. There's almost like this S composition that's happening. So as you're in this very first phase of your drawing, where you're not even drawing yet, where you're just looking, it begins with paying attention to what you're into, what's interesting to you. So I think I'm just going to go for this kind of S-like swoop, which kind of leads me already to the next 2 points that I have for you. And the next 2 points are, rather than sitting there, and I'm drawing with like a Prismacolor very thin, and I'm drawing very light in the beginning, so you might not be able to see much in the first phase of the drawing. I'll press harder later on. But in the first phase, as you're working, 2 things. Look for arcs, look for visual connections between the parts that you're drawing. So for me, I'm going from, again, if you can see the cursor, hopefully, I'm going from here to here, up, over to here. That's kind of the S that I'm seeing, that I'm describing. So work in big rhythms first. And second thing is work lightly, because in the beginning, it's very likely that whatever you're putting down is not right. It's inaccurate. And so you want to be able to erase it. So the next thing is, now that I have my big swoop, I'm now looking for sub-clusters. So when I say a sub-cluster, I mean like individual groupings of leaves. So I see a grouping here. I see this kind of grouping here. And I see a grouping here. And here. And when I draw these groupings, they don't look like the leaves yet. So then I see like this longish grouping here. One down here. And one down here. So as I'm placing down these kind of ovals, what I'm doing is I'm already editing some stuff out. So again, if you can see the cursor, all this stuff, that's getting too confusing for me. I don't even want to deal with it. I'm going to deal with this here though, and here. At least that's the plan. We'll see. So now I have my clusters, and as I'm looking at these clusters, I'm now just thinking in terms of scale. Like, do I feel like they relate well? Like, this is clearly a big one. Then this here is smaller, and it's broader up here, and then it kind of tapers. And then I have a really small one here, much smaller than I have so far. And then I have like this kind of narrow cluster in here. So I always like to encourage my students to work in phases, and with every phase, with every layer, you're becoming a little bit more accurate. So that's why I say draw lightly, because every subsequent layer, you'll make more informed choices, better choices. And that's not something to see as a fault. That's just something to accept as the way of drawing. You begin with a shitty first guess, and then you make it less shitty as you go along, and then hopefully you'll end up with something that's kind of cool. Okay, so what I'm doing now, so you notice I worked in kind of curvilinear lines, and now that I am okay with the scale and placement of my clusters, I'm doing what we practiced last week. If you were here last week, it was all about shapes and working with good shapes. So now I'm working on my big enveloping shapes for which I use straight angles. Now, if I was to hand this drawing to somebody in the current state and say, look, I'm drawing leaves, they'd say, you're fucking crazy. These are not leaves. What are you talking about? It's a mess. It looks just like a bunch of crazy tangles. It's because they don't know anything about drawing. That person doesn't know anything about drawing. They don't know about the different phases. They don't know about working in stages. And they can't see it yet because they haven't seen the reference. But I know that I have a plan that I am pursuing, and I'm trusting this plan. Okay. Now, the other thing that I'll say is, as I'm working on these different phases on this very complex foliage situation, is I'll pause often. I'll pause and I'll zoom out, and let me just see if this is even focused. And as I'm zooming out, I'm letting my eyes flick up and down between my reference and my drawing, reference and drawing. And as I'm flicking my eyes up and down, or left and right, wherever your reference is in relationship to what you're drawing, I'm kind of listening to what feels off in terms of big relationships. Okay, so now I feel pretty good about how I've placed things. And my marks are still light enough so I can erase things as I go. And now the next step is to break my kind of not curvilinear, but like now straight lined shapes into even smaller parcels. So you go from big clusters to smaller clusters. And I don't know if you've noticed, like I'm working in a very organized manner. I either work right, that would be the left side, left to right or right to left. I don't hop around within the groups because otherwise I lose my place and then all hell breaks loose. This cluster. So what is useful for me as I've chosen my focus, as I've chosen the area that I'm developing, is to have certain landmark shapes, certain landmark leaves, like leaves that you recognize. And to me, the easiest ones to come back to are the outer ones, the ones on the outer edges. So if I get lost, like if I, in here, I suddenly lose where I'm at, I come back to the edge where I can reorient. And trust me, there's plenty of opportunity to lose sight of what I'm doing. Which leads me to the next point. So I told you I have 5 points for you, 5 takeaway points for you today. And the next point is, I forgot it. No, I didn't. To just slow down. Like once you have your big rhythm, once you have your clusters, once you have your sub shapes, and you're getting into even smaller parcels, you need to take just a split second and acknowledge that you're entering the slow zone. You're entering that phase of the drawing where you have to become patient and you just have to buckle down. You have to slow down and buckle down. So if you're a naturally impatient person like me, that's why, see, I'm very impatient, and that's why I avoid things like this where I have to really slow down and take my time. But I also know that, you know, I don't want to have like this weakness in my drawing skill where I can only draw simple things. I need to have a strategy to work around this weakness. And so if I take that moment and tell myself, all right, Carolyn, and now take a deep breath, and now dive into that zone where time doesn't matter. There's no agenda. There's no, you have to finish this in 5 minutes. And you just work bit by bit. So currently, I'm parceling things out almost into individual leaves. So I'm going to come back over here for a second, even though I didn't make my way all the way to the other side yet, because I want to show you that, like, sometimes what I'll do as well is I'll literally count. I'll count, okay, in this cluster, how many leaves do I have? I have 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then another one overlapping. So you see, now I have blobs again. So in case this is too light for you, so I'm going to make this really dark up here in the simplified version. So if this is my enclosed shape, then I'm counting out the leaves and I'm saying, okay, there's 1 blob, 2 blob, 3 blobs. And these blobs are trying to be somewhat close to what the shapes are truly like, but they're still drawn lightly, so I can then kind of keep whittling around on them. So I've placed my individual leaves here. Let's go down to this next cluster. And I talk to myself as I do this, because otherwise I really lose track. So I'm talking in terms, okay, now underneath this cluster, I see a big leaf right here. And then there's 1, 2, 2.5 leaves on this little bottom thing here. Taking a deep breath, moving to the next subcluster. In this subcluster, I have 1 blob, 2 blobs, 3 blobs. Take a deep breath, go into the next one. So I have here my next subcluster. I have 3 leaves in that subcluster. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm not, as I said, I'm trying to get there, like the direction of the leaf accurate. Is it leaning this way, this way? I'm trying to get the size close, but I'm not trying to make it specific yet. I'm not interested yet in making it the kind of leaf that has a pointy tip, the kind of leaf that has a serrated edge. So hold on, so 1, 2, okay, and then there's a big one here. Okay, so now I'm getting into trouble here. I'm going to backtrack and address some scale issues. So currently what I'm doing is just I'm laying a foundation, an armature, to keep hanging on to. Okay, so 1, 2. So my eyes right now are constantly flicking up and down, because otherwise I'm losing my place again. Okay, so this is this big one here, then I have these 2 pairs. They're actually 2 little kind of more yellowish leaves right there. Then I have 1, 2, This is probably more pointing up. And I'm not going for 100% perfect. I'm going for good enough. Good enough that I can shape into characteristic. So not a copy machine, but a clarification process. Okay, I'm kind of looking at what time it is. All right, just want to see how long this is taking me. So I might end up just being able to tease out the specificity in this corner. I might have to leave the rest for later because I do want to have the chance to go to a different reference picture. But I do want to at least finish out one corner so you can see the full process start to finish. And I should have said this. You of course can draw from your own plant right now. If you're like, screw this reference, this is way too intense, and you just have a nice simple orchid next to you, by all means, draw your little orchid or succulent. Succulents are great because they're much simpler. Okay, so I'm starting to take out some of the tangly lines from my underdrawing. So I don't like erasing in terms of second guessing my marks. I do like erasing when it comes to cleaning up underlying foundation drawings that I no longer need. So I know that there are like some hardcore teachers that you might have encountered that say never erase. And I don't like the word never when it comes to drawing. I always like to know reasons, like why not? Tell me why. Okay, so as you can see in this area, I have now my individual leaves accounted for. They're kind of blobby, so now I'm gonna work on making them characteristic. When you deal with something highly detailed, highly complex, you wanna have a really sharp point on your pencil. So that's why I just switched. I switched from my beginning pencil to a freshly sharpened one. Okay, so here we go. So when I work on the leaves, and instead of letting my hand draw a curve in like one fell swoop, I'm pausing every time I see that curve change direction. I'm literally like making my hand halt and kind of reposition so I don't lose that specificity. And usually when you get to this phase, so this is going to be hard for the live stream, when you get to this phase, usually that's when you enter often the flow. You enter the zone and you kind of really dip into that non-verbal mode. So if you read my email today, I kind of made a comment about how I've heard rumors about drawing plants. So it's supposed to be relaxing. And I was being a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but I was referencing that phase of the drawing when you do get to those detailed contours, where you dip into that non-verbal part of your brain, and where it's really easy to lose track of time. So my pencil tip broke, so I have a point that's not quite as sharp as I'd like it to be. Wow. All right, I'm glad I have another one over here. I I switched colors because I ran out of my blues. I'm erasing out some more of that underlying stuff so I can be left with the more finished drawing. Okay, so where was I? I was right here. So this one goes up and over and down, and then tapers. And it comes up here. So at this point where I'm working on the specific look of the leaf shapes, I am not allowing myself to get into texture. So texture, I would count the kind of serrated edges as texture. I would count the veins on the leaf as texture. And the reason is because, as I said early on, I like working in stages where I don't feel overwhelmed at having to do everything all at once. So right now I'm in the making specific shapes stage. And when I'm done with that, then I'll revisit every single leaf and I'll decide how much texture every leaf should get, not in an attempt to put a finish on everything, but in being strategic and like, okay, so now that I have all my shapes, where do I want to draw attention? So everything I do is intentional. It's not just like oh, let's just see what happens. It's going to make sure that I pull the viewer's attention to the leaf that I thought was the coolest, that I want to tell a story around, not just because that's where it ended up. Because usually when we draw and we practice and we're having a good time, but then as we keep drawing, we kind of stop having a good time and we end up more like oh, I don't know if I got something out of this drawing. That usually happens when you didn't have a focus. You didn't know what you wanted to say with your drawing. And that's a subject for a whole nother sketch session about like, how do you know what you want to say about whatever it is that you're drawing? And when you're doing exercises, like let's say you're doing anatomy studies. I've been teaching anatomy for the last few weeks. And when you practice your anatomy skills, you draw in a very particular way. They're not beautiful drawings, they're kind of very utilitarian drawings. Your focus is on remembering muscle shapes. So like going into your practice, you know, okay, this is going to be that kind of drawing, and it kind of relieves the pressure of them needing to look beautiful or needing to have shading. So like it's very clear, I'm not making a beautiful drawing. It's not about my signature, my style in this drawing. In this drawing, it's about learning, about retaining information, kind of visual memorization almost. And then of course, you can have drawings where you do want to have your personal style come through. Okay, so you see now I have this one cluster plotted. I'm going to zoom in just to allow you to see that. See, so we went from like this big swoop to kind of blobby clusters, then to slightly bigger but linear or like straight angled clusters. Found the individual leaves in there, then made the leaves look specific. And now the last phase is to add some texture within that area. So as I said, I'm pausing real quick. I'm asking myself, what leaf do I really want to bring attention to? I really like these three down here. So that's where I'm going to put texture, because wherever you put texture, that's going to draw attention. Detail draws attention, contrast draws attention. So you want to be mindful about where you put it. And even there, I've been known to count out, okay, how many veins run through. Like, you don't just want to go like, and there's some veins there. Okay, let's add one more here. And now the last thing that I'll do is add a little accent by, and I hope my pencil, this is one of my last pencils, won't break. I want to darken the contours, but when I darken the contour, again, I prefer having like a crazy sharp, razor sharp point on my pencil. When I darken my contour, I don't want to wash out the specificity that I've put in. So I want to be mindful to go slow. So just accenting that a bit. And I'll leave it because I don't want to break the pencil. Okay, so this is the first reference. So it takes quite a while to make sense of all of this, but you can see now how that all comes together. So what I'll do next is I'll go to the next image and we'll have another go at it. So let me just switch the image. Okay, I love this one. This is from a hike somewhere in the Alps, and I saw these little wild strawberries. So taking a deep breath, gearing up for the second one, because I think we'll only be able to get 2 done. So let's remember our 5 points that I told you about. First, you need to choose a focus. So as I'm looking at this image, so again, if you can see my cursor, I'm really interested in this. So this little strawberry here, I love the leaves of the strawberry. I also like this taller stem coming up. So that's what I'll focus on. So I'll try actually to even zoom in a little bit more. I just want to make sure that all stays centered for you guys so you see exactly what I'm seeing here. Move this up. Now you might ask yourself, well, what about if I want to do the whole thing? What do I do then? It's the same process. It will just take much, much longer. Complexity, it demands time from you. Like, you can't do a complex subject with all the details quickly. If you do it quickly, it'll become a stylized, sketchy version, which is fine too, but you have to know that that's what you're going in for. Okay, so I'm choosing my strawberry cluster here, possibly this little thing too. So I begin with the big arcs. Like, how do I see those leaves connecting? And they, again, if you look at the cursor, to me they make this kind of hook-like rhythm. So that's what I'm beginning with. And then I begin with my big cluster. So I have a big cluster in the back. Then I have a cluster here. And you can call this the blob phase. I know that other teachers use the same term. I know Marshall Vanderf uses this term. You just blob things out. So I have 1 big cluster, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to place a little berry here. So this goes like this. I'll just scoot this over. This goes down. And I'm putting that blob up here because I did want to have that big leaf that's, I think, from a nettle or something. I'm going to bring that in. Yeah, maybe I'll even bring this one up here to go like this. Sound effects definitely help as you're trying to find out your swoops. It goes like, you see that? Okay, so now I have my blobs. So now that I have it blobbed out, I get into my shape phase. Big outer shapes. Again, we trained that last week. So you might still feel some soreness from that workout, but hopefully it'll serve you well today. So what I'm doing here is basically, if you weren't here last week, I'm looking for, if I'm looking at the outermost points of these leaves, and if I connected them with an angle, what kind of shape would I get? And I don't allow myself too many angles. 4 or 5 is what I'm aiming for. What I encourage you to do as we're drawing, pay close attention to your struggle or struggles, meaning not just that you have them, we all have our struggles when we draw. At least I surely hope that we all have our struggles. But where, when do they happen? What are you doing when you feel that kind of constriction happening? That feeling of wanting to run away. Like, what are you usually doing? And see if you can find a question around that. Once you start to learn to ask questions around where you feel uncomfortable when you draw, then you can find answers. But if you're just uncomfortable and you just run away from it, then you'll never improve that part. You'll just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And if you already do know where your struggles happen, be sure, if you have a question around them, be sure to pop them into the chat today. I'd love to help you out with any of your questions. Okay, so completed. You know what, this is kind of cool, sorry. I just saw something sparkly that I needed to put in. It's like that in the movie Up, when the dog sees a squirrel and they're just like, squirrel! And they all stop and like look in the different direction. So I just saw this little leaf cluster over here that I thought was just so cute, and I needed to put that in. what I was going to say, pre-leaf cluster beckoning, was that now that I'm completed, or now that I've finished that straight angled portion of the drawing, I'm gonna go into my next blob phase. So remember, now I'm gonna see how many leaves are here per angle cluster. So, and I always begin where I can see it clearly. Always set yourself up for success. So I see one big leaf here, 2, 3. I'm aiming for the accurate scale, not for the accurate shape at this time. And I have, this is one entire one. I'm not sure about this one. This might be one leaf that kind of looks like it has a rip in it, or it might be 2. So I'm going to treat it as 2. 2. Let's go back up here. 1, 2, 3. And so again, this leads to that next point on my list of 5 points that I had for you. As you're getting into that counting out the individual parts phase, you've got to slow down, you've got to buckle down, you got to kind of give yourself that mental reminder, oh, this is going to take some time. And if you know that you signed up for it, today, chances are you knew what you were in for. You knew that this was going to be about complexity. You knew that this was going to be challenging. So if you know that what you're in for, then, you know, you just relax into it rather than fighting the fact that, oh, why does this take so long? Which is often what students will struggle with, like when they get to a part in the still life, they didn't set up the still life. And then they get to the flower, and then they hate the fact that the flower has petals. And they just want to be done with it because they couldn't care less about this still life. And so that's like when I ask them, well, okay, what are you going to do? You can run away, you can run out of the classroom and be done with it, throw in the towel. Or you can just take a deep breath and say, okay, fine, I signed up for drawing class. I guess doing complex things is part of drawing class. God damn it. And just do it. I'm sorry, I curse. When I draw, I curse. If that offends you, maybe don't come back. Okay, so that last cluster, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up here was another one. Okay. Kind of excited. It seems like I might have time to get somewhat far with this one. 2, 3. Okay. So I got all my individual parts accounted for. So now I'm just going to choose the area that I want to bring focus to. So I can begin there and bringing the specificity of the shapes out. And I really just love this trio of leaves here in relationship to the strawberry, so that I'm going to make that my starting point. So again, wherever you like something, whatever made you pick an area to draw, make sure you tackle that sooner rather than later. Because that was the sparkle that caught your eye. That's what you want to make sure goes into your drawing. So notice I'm not doing the little teeth yet, the little serration part yet. Just like I did the big angles for the clusters, I'm going for the big angles of the leaves now. See, the nice thing is, like, once you have this kind of organized drawing process, I'm not freaking out over, but when am I supposed to do this, and when am I going to get to that, and you know, feeling you're going to forget something, and then you get overwhelmed. Okay, so when you're working on specifics, I probably said this before, but again, it bears repeating. Stay away from curves. The curves are great for blobbing things out, for finding those visual connections. By all means, use curves at that phase of the drawing. But when you want to make your thing, whatever it is, look like itself, you gotta change into straight angles. And not because you're gonna leave them as straight angles from here on out, but because that's how you build the 2D structure. The specific look. Because if you go to the details, like let's say you draw the edge of your leaves, I'm going to bring this down a little bit, like this, like curvy lines, and then you might have lost some of the characteristic nature in there, and you might put in your details, but they're just, you know, the curve was wrong. Curves are really hard for our brain to calibrate and for our hand to capture. I mean, of course, see, everything always has a caveat. Of course, if you only have 10 minutes, if you only have 5 minutes, if you only have 2 minutes, by all means, draw curves. Like, they're gonna be the expressive mark. But if you have to count your losses, then you wanna know what it is that you're after and what your time frame is. So one thing that I'm regretting right now is I didn't count out how many serrations I have. Let's backtrack here. Let's just kind of freehanding it. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was almost the same amount what I freehanded. Okay. You erase some of the tangles here. Oops, wrong pencil. Let's go to the next one. Let's see if I have another sharp pencil. Not much better. So when I get to the detail phase, where I'm getting really specific about the details and the shape specifics, that's when I make sure I have a needle-like pencil. And if it has dulled in the process, I will stop and use my pencil sharpener. I just unplugged mine, so that's why I'm not using my sharpener right now. But luckily I had a couple pencils ready to go. Okay, so now these are starting to be specific to their true self. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you are in this phase right now where you have your shape, your leaf shapes, and you're getting into the details, put me on mute. Just start working really slowly and just enjoy having a nonverbal moment. Or don't, but it's something like if you're craving that kind of flow, then it's at your fingertips right now because you did the work. So I'm looking at so on the strawberry stem, where does it come out in relationship to this leaf? I'm looking, is this really straight or is there a little bit of a curve in there? There's a bit of a sway right here, super subtle. And it goes up. And then it turns. And with every direction change, every turn, I kind of pause my pencil to reflect that turn. Instead of sliding around the corner. And again, I only do that if like real specific capturing is my goal. If I'm fine with a stylized version, I'll let my pencil slide around the corner, slide around the curve rather, excuse me. Because again, if you let your pencil slide around a curve, you lose a certain degree of accuracy. Here's my strawberry. So cute. I don't know if you've ever eaten wild strawberries. Little side note, they taste very different from real strawberry, as in like from cultivated strawberries. I don't even know how to describe it. They have like a brighter, not so, they're sweet, but they're sweet in a different way. And they taste earthier to me. So you might see my head in the way real quick because I need to get really close. I wanted to see if this kind of yellowish strawberry had some top leaves. I think it does. I have about 7 more minutes. This is great. Get some detail in some of the other areas. So let me see. So again, right now, because I have my first agenda accomplished of like, okay, I wanted to get that strawberry, I wanted to get that cluster of 3 leaves, but now that I have that, I'm gonna make myself pause for just a second, zoom out, and then again make a very conscious decision about, okay, what do I want to do next? Oh, I remember, I like this guy over here. Okay, so let me work my way over there then. And again, I'm gonna get close, my hair is gonna be in the way because I needed to see what's happening here. So if you're working from life, from something complex, and there is an area where you can't quite tell what's going on, get really close, like walk around to the other side of it. Like that's really the main reason why a lot of teachers will say, oh, you have to work from life. Working from life is the only way of learning, which is not true. But it has that definite benefit of being able to walk around your subject matter for clarification. That is something that you cannot do when you're working from a photograph. There are other problems with working from photographs, of course, that you have to be aware of. Like you don't want to have distortion, you don't want to have your lights blown out, you don't want to have like super dark shadow areas where you lose information. But that's for another discussion. My main point was that if you can't tell what's happening, get really close, walk around it to the other side. Get those big angles in first. Here, 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 and then this is a separate thing. Okay, so now I'm counting out the serration. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it disappears here. Let me take out this underlying line work here. So again, one of the points that I made to you was that you want to work lightly in the beginning. So as you keep working over your armature, you can take it out. If you're heavy-handed, if you're using a tool that's too dark, it's too smudgy, too soft, it might be hard to erase that stuff. So these are all things you want to plan for, making sure you are using the right kind of tool for what it is that you're intending. And if you're not sure what the right kind of tool is, ask around, ask other artists. Like, hey, I'm trying to make this kind of a drawing. I see you have something similar going on in your posts. Like, what are you using? And hopefully people are helpful and tell you. Most of them are. Okay, last cluster, and then I'll have to call it, wrap it up. This little guy here that caught my attention earlier. Let me take this stuff out here. As I am wrapping up, if you have questions, last call for questions. If you have requests on what we should be focusing on in coming weeks, put it into the comments, let me know. Bring a friend next time. Not that you aren't enough. I'm glad you're here. But it's fun to draw in a big group. Okay, so then this oh, there are even more leaves up there. Oh, that's so cute. I don't think I'll have time to. I'm gonna make time. I'm just gonna get these little guys in. Let that go, but I want to come back to these last two leaves and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. And then the last phase of your drawing is, again, asking yourself, where do you want to bring focus? So right now, I completed the capturing specific shapes in that area, but I have not completed yet bringing a focus now to, because like right now, everything is kind of equally developed. So if I had an extra few minutes, I would come into this area here and start bringing out more of the veins, and through that kind of texture and detail carefully, I would bring more attention here and less there. So let me switch to the camera, and I want to repeat some of the main points from today so you can either write them down or just kind of hear me say them one more time. So when you're dealing with something complex, you want to keep these 5 points in mind. The first one is that you need to just spend a good amount of time looking at your scene, and you need to decide what are you going to tackle of the scene. If you're tackling the entire scene, you need to know that it's going to take a long time, and you need to just kind of mentally and practically prepare for it. But once you've picked out, okay, this is the focus I want to have, then you begin by searching for visual connections between the parts. So first is finding your focus. Second is finding the big visual connections. Then the third part is you want to work in clusters and groupings. And it's preferable to start with blobs, but then chop them into straight angled groupings. Once you have them, you feel good about the relationship of each other, you find the even smaller subparts within the groupings. And again, you start by blobbing out, okay, how many leaves are in this cluster? Just little kind of curvy blobs. And then again, angle them out. And as you're doing this, that's the fourth part, I think. No, it's the last part, the fifth part is slow down, buckle down, know what you're in for, and just kind of enjoy that once you get to that, creating some more specific shapes and putting those details and the textures in, that you get to switch out of your thinking brain, because you did all the legwork. Like, you know, you're organized, you know that you won't run off the page, you know you won't end up having proportion issues because you did the work. And then you can just enjoy, savor drawing the contours, putting in the details. So I hope this was useful to you. I had a great time practicing with you. I needed it. That's something that I need to definitely strengthen. So I was grateful to have you supporting the energy of the virtual room. I don't see any questions, so I guess I don't have any feedback to give. What I would love to see, though, is if you are willing to share your drawings and tag me in them on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, tag me at Kira Studios, and I'd love to see and kind of give you a high five on having drawn with me. And in case you're not on my email list and you don't want to miss the next upcoming session, which by the way is figure drawing. I researched on how not to get banned when we have nude models, but we'll just cross our fingers and see how it goes. But we'll have figure drawing for the next sketch session. So if you don't want to miss it and you're not already on my email list, get on my email list. I send entertaining weekly emails with drawing and creativity tips, and you can find that at kiraoc.com/3 questions. You get a free workbook on how to make your drawings better with 3 simple questions. And I think I put the link even in the stream description below, so you can find it there. Alrighty, that's it from me. Thanks again for being here. I love that you're drawing with me, and I'll see you next week for figure drawing. Bye-bye.